Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today I'm trying out this black-white Abigale aggro deck that's using some very large creatures that often have some drawbacks associated with them, such as the Rakshasa, a 5/5 trampler with Decade that has to be sacrificed at the end of combat, or the Sunset Saboteur, which gives the opponent additional +1 counters when it attacks, as well as the Bebop Rocksteady, a 7/5, although whenever it attacks or blocks we have to sacrifice a permanent or discard a card. Well, all those creatures have one thing in common, which is that they have a lot of power given their mana cost, and we can abuse that using Abigale, Eloquent, First Year, a 2-mana 1/1 with Flying, First Strike and Lifelink. When it enters, up to one other target creature loses all abilities, that includes all of those drawbacks, and then we get to put a Flying counter, a First Strike counter, and a Lifelink counter onto that creature. So we can turn our Rakshasa into a 5/5 Flying, First Strike, Lifelink, Saboteur a 4/1 with those abilities, and Bebop a 7/5, so that's quite the upgrade in most cases. And then we're also running the full set of Ajani, which can use the -3 ability to give a creature flying and double strike until end of turn, which is also very synergistic with all these highly powered creatures, such as Rakshasa attacking for 10 damage in a single attack step, Saboteur 8, and Bebop a whopping 14 damage, and that's before we consider any additional +1 counters that the +1 ability can provide. So these are some of the key synergies that we're building around, and all these creatures also synergize incredibly well with the Sentry, a 2-mana 2/2 with First Strike and Lifelink, and whenever it attacks we may put a creature card with mana value X or less from our hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, where X is the number of attacking creatures we control. So that's why we have a bunch of 1-drops that are good at attacking alongside the Sentry on turn 3. We've got a full set of Dream Beavers, 1/1 flyer that lets us scry 1 when it enters, in addition to draining the opponent for 1. Cecil with Death Touch is not a creature the opponent's often going to be able to block early on. And then Veteran Survivor is a bit flimsier, but is also important to give the deck some main deck graveyard hate against all the graveyard combo decks if we can enable its survival ability. So turn 1, play one of these 1-drops, turn 2 Sentry, turn 3 attack. We can put a 2-mana creature into play tapped and attacking, and that includes Rakshasa, which now also circumvents the Decade trigger for a whole turn, so we get to hit the opponent for 5 and keep the Rakshasa in play. Same with the Saboteur, which now also circumvents giving the opponent a +1/+1 counter, so we get to hit the opponent for an extra 4 damage. They're unlikely to block or menace creature, and then have a Saboteur in play going forward, and then we can maybe follow that up with an Abigale or a Ajani to give it flying and hopefully double strike to just close out the game in a big attack. And then we also have 2 turncoats, which are also quite synergistic, as we can maybe cheat them in play for free using the Sentry to clear a path and keep attacking, but they also have the Sneak ability, which lets us exile an opposing creature for good without returning it back to play when the turncoat gets answered, so that can also maybe pick up one of our evasive 1-drops, such as the Dream Beavers, so we can clear a path and keep attacking. So those are all quite synergistic as well. And then the mana base is also quite streamlined with lots of black-white dual lands, and then we also have a few extra utility lands if the game drags out, Realm of Co making unblockable spirit tokens, and the Air Temple giving us additional +1 counters, also very powerful with all these First Strike creatures, making it very hard for the opponent to block. I will be playing this in best of 1 today, but I did also prepare kind of a sample sideboard to maybe give you some ideas if the deck interests you and you want to try it out in traditional standard. Seam Rip can complement the main deck copies of Requiting Hex, which can give us some cheap interaction for other creature strategies. We've got additional copies of Veteran Survivor for graveyard decks, as well as Kudzil's Flanker, which I did also consider for the main deck as another creature we can maybe flash into play to exile an opposing graveyard, but it can also of course attack for a decent chunk of damage, especially with double strike from Ajani. And then a Clarion Conqueror is a way for us to shut down some of the green Badger Mole strategies if we can get in play in time. Of course, without Momo to discount it by 1, sometimes it will be too slow as a 3-mana play, but it still has some good synergy. Of course, it does shut down our own Planeswalker as well, so then you probably need to take out Ajani. And then speaking of Planeswalkers, I've got a few more in the sideboard for the grindy control matchups, since our deck is somewhat soft to board wipes, so then having a few Planeswalkers to diversify our threats is important. We've got this one making additional 1/1 Kithkin tokens, can also maybe deal damage to tapped creatures, and then a Kaya can also make additional spirit tokens, and also doubles up as additional graveyard hate should we need it. And then, of course, against control, we always want to take out some of our spot removal spells and replace those with targeted discard effects like Duress, which can maybe take away a sweeper before the opponent gets a chance to cast it. Cathar Commando gives us a flexible answer to artifacts and enchantments, while still being a creature that can apply a bit of pressure. We can put it in play with a sentry. So ideally, we don't want to include too many non-creature spells, since the more creatures we have, the better our sentry and Abigale are going to be, of course. So yeah, that's just a few suggestions out of the sideboard. But for now, let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. What do we think of our hand? Can play a tapped Temple, and then turn to Saboteur, which plays well with a Ajani. Yeah, I think we can try this. Opponent blue-red with an elusive Otter, so the prowess deck. Still like Saboteur. They might be able to remove it, paying the ward. For now, Stormchaser's Talent, a good one to exile the token with a turncoat, so they don't get it back. Can maybe first attack with the Saboteur, put a counter on the token, and then exile it. I'll take 3. And then if they want to just trade both tokens for Saboteur, that's fine by me. Does have Menace. And then now we turncoat. So, could maybe go back-to-back Ajani for flying and double strike. Or we could get a Bebop in play first. Opponent's opting. The turncoat we don't really mind trading away. So they would need 2 1-mana instants to punish a block, which they very well might have. Yeah, I guess no blocks. If they hadn't shocked the Steam Vents, I maybe would have gone for it. Okay, opponent keeps up 2 mana. So probably not the turn for Ajani. So let's just attack with probably both. See what happens. Opponent might be waiting to remove Saboteur until after they get to +1 counter. But then Bebop's a large blocker. Although honestly, an attack with this and double strike is already lethal. So I could also just play this and pass. Yeah, that's also not unreasonable. Played extra cautiously. Don't know how many instant speed bound spells they would necessarily have. Find Sleight of Hand Steam Vents. Could also discard the Rakshasa if we do block, and then potentially renew it out of the graveyard to prevent the opponent from blocking and just get in for 14 as is. Opponent is staying back as well. So yeah, that's starting to complicate matters a little bit. If that 1 mana is an Into the Floodmaw, for instance, I might get punished for going for Ajani. But I think I give it a try.
The sun will rise on a peaceful.
And then we don't mind discarding a Rakshasa.
Your righteousness uplifts you.
Alright, it looks like we get there. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. This hand has one glaring issue. Although we do get a scry from beavers, plus a couple draw steps to find land number 2. And then we've got a lot of 1-drops to both enable the sentry and then put in play afterwards. So I don't actually hate this. On the play, this would be a little riskier for sure. And then Cecil's also just a good defensive card if we need to trade. Although 3 copies is maybe a bit much. Say no to a second Dreamweavers. Our opponent with a Hedge Maze typically doesn't see playing Kona combo, so more likely to be a Sultai control or graveyard deck. So then we probably want to get the Survivors going. Would have also been nice to put in play with the Sentry, because that still helps enable the survival ability. Yep, Dredger's Insight, so the Survivor's gonna have some work to do. For now, attack, play Sentry, and exile probably Arden as a more immediate threat if they have Kevero. Cavern Human to make Kevero and maybe a Town Greeter uncounterable. And yeah, they're already looking at the graveyard. Kevero happy to make a dragon, although we can exile it with the turncoats. Even using the Sentry's ability. So how do we want to proceed? I guess we attack, put in turncoats, and then I can Abigale the turncoat afterwards. Pass a turn. And our opponent scoops it up. Alright, so our 1-lander worked out in the end. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a decent hand. Cecil into Sentry can cheat out the Rakshasa, and then we don't need to sacrifice it the turn we put it into play using the Sentry's ability. Facing a red-black. Does Cecil survive? Opponent with a Slick Shot. Always a scary card. So now going for Requiting Hex might be the safer play. Because if I go for Sentry, there's a decent chance they remove it and get a huge chunk of damage in with a Slick Shot. Although if Sentry somehow lives, then I would get to Rakshasa plus Hex on the following turn, put it in play, and even play another Sentry afterwards. Yeah, I think at 19 or maybe 17 after this attack I can consider it. I don't even think I attack with Cecil actually. Just play Sentry and pass. And then if they take out Sentry and deal a big chunk of damage, it also maybe threatens to transform Cecil. But for now I don't necessarily want to lose 2 life. The Black Splash could also be for a Sellsword. So then they could maybe fling the Slick Shots after a big attack. They've got a second copy. They might be doing the math to see how Cecil would transform here. Our opponent's going full bore. So take 9. But now I get to put in the Rakshasa. And then still play another Sentry. And keep up Requiting Hex. Cecil also gets to transform. Even though we gain 2, we're gonna lose 2. And then I get to keep up Requiting Hex. Potentially blinding onto one of our creatures. So we can wait for them to pump. Challenger's fine. Can block that one pretty easily. And they've got a Sellsword. Okay, so they are targeting me with the Sellsword. So they would deal 3 damage basically, unless I hex. So these triggers resolve. See what the Valiant reveals. A burst lightning. Good to know about. Yeah, if I hex now, what's the worst case? They can still burst lightning me. And then these deal essentially 12 damage. So then I die. So I think we have to let this resolve. And then hex a slick shot. Alright, so now I can blight. Doesn't matter too much where we put the -1 counter. And we survive at 2 life, and then next turn we have more than enough. Can play this tapped. So lets me play a Johnny. And we can give something flying and double strike.
Fight for those who cannot. Strike at evil's heart.
Sweet. Super close one here against Rakdos aggro. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a promising hand. Cecil into Sentry. Can maybe cheat out the Saboteur, and by putting in play with the Sentry, we also don't have to give the opponent an extra +1 counter. So the Sentry has a ton of great synergies throughout. And then we've got Bebop, so finding Abigale would be great. Opponent on a green Landfall deck. I did consider running the Clarion Conqueror to shut down Banjo Mole decks, but of course that would also shut down our Ajani, which is a big part of our game plan, so eventually decided against it. But it is definitely a sideboard option for these decks if you were interested in trying this in best of 3. Opponent with a pretty nice start, Banjo Mole into Explorer with a Fabled Passage. So, yeah, can cast this, put in Saboteur. They would get to ambush the Sentry. Maybe if I keep up mana, they won't. But I think the attack is still worth it. And yeah, opponent values their Explorer too much that they don't want to risk putting it in harm's way. So now we gotta hope for a Ajani to close it out for us. Fly one of our creatures with double strike, of course Bebop being the best target. And our opponent doesn't have a ton of forests in play, so it's gonna be tricky for them to deploy the nursery, which could maybe make some tree folk tokens. Oh, opponent got a nursery down. But they are out of land drops. No, they still had a Fabled Passage left. Alright, that's gonna make things very difficult now. But we also didn't draw what we needed. So, Cecil just trades with one of their creatures. Bebop only trades for 1 tree folk, so it's not even all that exciting. So an all-out attack doesn't seem particularly effective. Just gotta keep this back, block the 3/4s. And then... yeah, not sure what needs to happen. Can maybe activate Realm of Co a few times. Second nursery, yeah. So, not a whole lot we can do at this point. Just gotta hope our opponent makes some horrible mistake, leaving themselves dead to something like an Ajani top deck. But we're not gonna be able to keep up with 8 tree folk tokens per turn, basically. Found Abigale. I mean, Abigale's not bad here. Probably still not good enough. Can give this flying and first strike. So it does play defense quite well, but it's still not the best attacker. So now we're on the Realm of Co plan. They could also use Escape Tunnel's second secret mode to make a creature unblockable. And yeah, that's what they're going for now with Harmonizer, to maybe double a creature's power, and a second eye still. So we should be dead in short order. Yeah, I think this is a pretty poor matchup, especially for a best of one configuration, but it could certainly be improved by adding Clarion Conqueror out of the sideboard, and maybe some other effective removal spells. So even though the Escape Tunnel needs you to have a creature with power 2 or less, you can make it unblockable and then still increase its power afterwards, and it will remain unblockable. So that's what they're doing here with the Harmonizer. And this Badger Mole is very lethal. Opponent should still have a couple forests left. Got any more land drops left? Looks like 256. Alright, GG's, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand is functional. We can cast all our black spells here, so we don't need white mana right away. We get to improve our hand with Dreambeavers, so I'll give it a shot. Haven't decided yet which one drop to lead with. In the face of removal, maybe Dreambeavers first. Find another Cecil. Gonna decline for now. But there is a world where the first one gets removed and we want a backup. Is our opponent also black-white? And the most helpful Weaver, so this is likely the Skeletons deck. Okay, so they will have a decent amount of removal, including ways to get around Ward with nowhere to run. So Saboteur's not going to be at its best. So maybe this turn we prefer Hex plus Cecil. And wait a bit longer on Saboteur. Ideally we use Hex in response to a Sheltered by Ghosts, which the opponent's also playing. They had the Seam Rip. Goes for Dreambeavers. And nowhere to run, so that will stay in play, negating the ward. Okay, could try and go big now. Yeah, at least this survives another nowhere to run. They might have the 4 mana sorcery to put some permanents in play. A nice United Battlefront. Nope, it's going to be a case making a skeleton into another Weaver. And we found Abigale, so that was a great draw. I don't think we hexed the token. Fine if they trump. And then play Saboteur. I mean, I guess I could also pass, so that if they Sheltered by Ghosts, I don't lose my flying and first strike counter. That might be better. Abigale still has a decent block on the Spider token. They had another case instead. Okay, so I feel pretty good about this. Skeleton attacks, we're easily winning the race. And then I suppose I could hex the Spider to guarantee 8 damage. So next turn they can give something double strike. Yeah, I think we're fine either way. I think I should keep the hex in hand just on the off chance that they top deck sheltered by ghosts, which would maybe turn things around. Blocking Abigale doesn't really work because of first strike. So they were better off blocking my 7-powered creature. Skeleton has double strike. Maybe we get to find out their last card, otherwise I happily take 8. Can't take it out with nowhere to run, can't target it with Seam Rip, sheltered by ghosts is not an option, so if they're playing kind of the stock lists, this should be a safe attack. Put more counters on the same skeleton so we can maybe hex it later. But the game should be over here. They did have another nowhere to run, so they could take out the Saboteur, but opponent's still taking 8. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have a functional hand. It's definitely missing some synergies, but yeah, curving out some decent creatures into a Planeswalker with some removal, facing the 5-color ally deck, presumably. Okay, so this should be an interesting matchup. I think the opponents can be a little bit favored, since they just get to leverage a ton of great creature synergies and kind of go over the top. If we don't draw some of our enablers like the Sentry or Abigale, we're gonna struggle. Their opponent can likely make 2 1/1s here at instant speed, so I don't think Survivor is interested in attacking, really. Although Saboteur is also gonna have a hard time getting through unless we jump it with a Jani. So yeah, we'll just pass. But the ally deck also has some life gain built in. So there's the reinforcements. This might be an Avatar Aang that they can flash in. No blocks. Yeah, so not a turn for a Jani if they can airbend it. Would rather double spell Sentry with Survivor. Still don't really need to hex anything. Could attack with Saboteur. Put to counter on Momo if they feel inclined to flash an Aang before blockers. Then we can still hex Momo so they can double block Saboteur. So then the Survivor could also attack if I'd like. If they have another reinforcements, I do get punished for this attack pretty badly. But then they probably wouldn't have shocked themselves. Saboteur does have Menace, so they take the trade, that's fine. And they do play Aang after all. So what's the plan here? Airbend your own creature, maybe? Or are we still paying the ward? Bouncing Survivor. Okay, that seems acceptable. I'll just play another Sentry and another Survivor. And then hope for a nice 3-mana creature, maybe, that we get to put in play with the ability. Do have to watch out for the Waterbend mode, which can represent a lot of damage if our opponent's going wide. Opponent passes, so they could technically Waterbend here at instant speed, tapping all their creatures. So yeah, kind of need to make something happen with a Jani. Could jump Saboteur. I guess they can still double block and then transform, make this a 5/5. It's not amazing, but I currently don't have a great solution to Aang otherwise. Alright, let's try it.
As long as we stand together, we shall win. Strike at evil's heart.
Yeah, if I had an untapped lane to keep up Hex, we could at least take out Momo, but that's not the case. And then counter on probably Momo again. Or could make it a ground creature, I guess. Target the token, so if we draw our 3-mana creature, we can exile it without our opponent getting it back. Although if we target the reinforcements, it's a little weaker if they decide to pick up their own creature with something like Appa. So opponent does have an Appa here, bouncing all their stuff. So they get to soak up the attack. And now they get to re-enable all those abilities as well. So yeah, not an ideal turn for us. But yeah, maybe our opponent's waterbending would have been even worse. It's hard to say. Now a Divide Guide, so their allies can make mana. Yeah, I desperately need something like an Abigale to target the Saboteur. Opponent just has too many random flying creatures that stop our lethal ability from a Ajani from connecting. And yeah, as I've kind of alluded to at the start of the game, eventually our opponent's going to go over the top. Whether it's by drawing a ton of cards or just airbending Aang. So they still have 2 mana up here to maybe play the reinforcements at instant speed. Oh, we actually drew Abigale. So, definitely playing it. Counter on Saboteur. It will lose the ward ability, but I also don't have to put a +1 counter on the opponent's creatures anymore, which is a plus. So then we should have a clean attack with Saboteur, 5 power first strike and flying. Although, am I surviving the attack on the way back is a question. Opponent takes 5. Yeah, I think Sentry still gets the nod. So Ajani most likely dying this turn. Can jump with Abigale, but yeah, opponent's gonna waterbend Aang, as we suspected. Does have reach. And another Aang to bounce the Saboteur, presumably. Yeah, that's gonna reduce our chances pretty significantly. Otherwise there was maybe hope of stealing a win with another Ajani for double strike. So then we lose Ajani. Opponent just has the 1 creature back, but we did not draw an answer. And I also can't put anything in play with Sentry, since these are in exile. So yeah, I think that's the end of the line for us, sadly. Can still Ajani put a counter on Sentry, so that can attack past Aang. But don't really see how that saves me in the long run. So probably just play Survivor. Pass a turn. And if we're not dead already, we will be on the following turn. There's a Voyager, so that can gain them more life and draw some cards. And a Lieutenant to massively pump their team as well. So I don't know if hexing here makes a difference, but I guess I can try. With or without Blight, probably doesn't matter too much. Take out your Voyager. Big attack, a lot of counters. So this one doesn't trample. Just blocking all the largest creatures, and then This has me taking 24. I gained 3. So I'm still taking Exaxes. But yeah, without a Saboteur, there's no way we can somehow top deck lethal next turn. Alright, GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand is missing maybe like a Sentry or an Abigale to really get things going. But it's still keepable. We've got lands and spells. Facing blue-black. So if it is a graveyard deck, at least we have a turn 1 survivor. And yeah, it looks like the Sultai graveyard deck, but they also have a Bookworm, which can prevent our survivor from attacking. At least until we maybe get a Jani down. So this turn, leading Saboteur. They didn't discard anything too valuable either. And with a Cavern, it also means they wouldn't be able to play Awaken the Honored Dead on turn 3. Now Overlord's gonna fill the graveyard a bunch. Including a Bringer of the Last Gift. We'll see if they want to pick it up to keep it safe. They do. Although they ended up discarding it anyways. Alright, so the only way I can guarantee a survival trigger is if Ajani gives us Flying and Double Strike. And yeah, that might just be necessary here. And then we'll leave the Saboteur back to protect Ajani as opposed to attacking with it, although that's also an option. Lose Ajani, get in for 8. But the rest of my hand is not amazing, so I think we need Ajani to stick around for a while. Exile your Bringer. Take the trade. And another Overlord. Could maybe get Bookworm back. They also found a Formidable Speaker. Right, no 4th land, so Survivor does get a clean attack in, which is nice.
Your soul burns with light.
And then get rid of probably a Terror of the Peaks. So the pressure is mounting. If they cast a Kavero just for terror, it's not the end of the world. And that's what they're going for. And draw Bebop, okay. So, if Ajani pluses, they probably take the trade for Survivor. They still take 5, and then we put a 7/5 into play, which we can give flying to next turn. That seems reasonable.
Let me show you how to fight.
Alright, opponent takes it, so they're planning big things with Kavero. And then we get to exile another creature. Survivor now has hexproof. And then, yeah, probably still go for Bebop. And then next turn we could maybe renew to prevent the opponent from blocking. So they can finish off Ajani, but we'll see if they can survive the attack. Might finally get to see both modes of the Rakshasa, don't often get to renew it. Alright, Deceit, we'll see an empty hand. I guess they didn't have the mana for the bounce effect. They do get to deal 5 damage. which, yeah, could finish off Bebop, so that's still pretty good. But now they cannot cast Bookworm since Cavern's naming Avatar. And yeah, Rakshasa should just end it. I guess a +1 counter is good enough. And yeah, opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. This hand has a lot of creature interaction. Could be alright, depending on the matchup. Because we can also maybe sneak using the Dream Beavers, pick it back up. Facing turn 1 Llanowar Elves, so that one we can hex as we draw another copy. Next turn we can play Dream Beavers, maybe hex another mana creature. I like a Leyline Weaver. Could also be convinced to play a Survivor instead of a Dream Beavers. But if my curve is going to be cast this and then sneak another one, I want to have the flyer in play. So land number 4 wouldn't be bad, but I'm somewhat likely to draw another one, and I don't want to flood out either. Can always cast it without sneaking, so the 4th land's not really all that necessary. Alright, opponent's got some graveyard hate, that's fine. Only effects are Rakshasa. Abigale, not amazing at the moment, so I don't mind just playing the turncoat to slow the opponent down even further, make it harder to deploy their Nature's Rhythm or Ouroboros. They're playing blue, so they probably also have the Riddler. Fourth land untapped, and it is Quantum Riddler with Warp. They wanted to draw 2 cards, which is why they played the land first, maybe not knowing if they had a 2-mana play to make. They did find a Badger Mole, as it turns out. They probably have to hold this to answer the Riddler once they replay it. And draw lands, but it's tapped. That's alright, so this turn, Abigale the turncoat, play Survivor. And then next turn I'll be able to sneak in the turncoat since we have multiple flyers to set it up. But yeah, I'm worried that we're not quite going to get there before the opponent takes over. So this next turn is going to be incredibly important. The logical play would just be tap out for the Riddler. Opponent goes for an Ouroboros instead. And a Seam Rip. Okay, cannot target the turncoat. So what's the next best target? Goes for the Survivor. And Badger Mole attacks. So we've got 5 in the air. So sneaking doesn't allow me to deal first strike damage and then pick up my creature, unlike ninjutsu. But yeah, I could still potentially sneak, pick up the turncoat, exile Ouroboros. They get an elf back, but then we get another turncoat in hand. Or I could pick up Abigale, so I can give the other turncoat flying next turn as well, but then they'll have a large blocker that they can deploy. So I think I would rather turncoat sneaking with another turncoat. Although of course this one's not going to have flying anymore, so then this one might have difficulty getting past the Badger Mole on the ground. So it's definitely a close call. Could just pick up the beavers, exile Ouroboros, play it, hope to draw something exciting, but we don't have a ton of cards that can help us get past the Riddler. So I think I still make this play. And then Ouroboros exiled for good. Opponent still takes 5. Yeah, if Sneak were ninjutsu, then we could have dealt 3 more with first strike. So there's the Riddler, draw 2. And then we gotta hope they don't have much action left. Another Banter Mole is scary. So we can go for the all-out attack. And then they kind of have to block the turncoat, otherwise they're just dead. Turncoat's not going to die since we exile the Riddler. And then we get to redeploy the Dream Beavers. The opponent takes the trades for Banter Mole. Get to keep Abigale. There's also an argument for exiling the other Banter Mole, but I think we need to get past the flyer. Opponent's down to 3, so now Dream Beavers would put him to 2, and then an attack with the flyers could be lethal. Assuming they don't play another reach creature or a Riddler. Sentry, I don't think is going to do much for me anymore. Something like an Ajani could be useful at jumping the turncoats. A Mockingbird for 2. Alright, that can copy the turncoats. And now they have a flying version. It's pretty effective. And what do you exile? Goes for Abigale. And another Ouroboros. That's rough. Yeah, that's gonna turn the game around very quickly now. So I might have one more turn to top deck, and then the game's just over. An Air Temple was probably one of our better draws, weirdly enough. Although I don't think it's still quite good enough. So it forces Ouroboros or Turncoat to block. So is there a point in attacking with the Dream Beavers? It threatens lethal by itself. But they would just block with Turncoat, but then we do force Ouroboros to block. Versus just attack with Turncoat. Yeah, I think we need to force them to block with Ouroboros. But I think we're in trouble no matter what here. Let's try this. So this is now a forced block, Ouroboros on Turncoats. Turncoat on Dream Beavers. So we dealt with Ouroboros. But yeah, opponent can just kill us on the way back pretty much. And our opponent can hardcast a Crater Hoof as well. Alright, very close one here against the Banter Mole deck. We had a promising start, but just lacked a little bit of oomph to get across the finish line. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a functional hand. Turn 1. I think I start with Cecil over Dream Beavers. Turn 2 Sentry and then attack, putting in Saboteurs to hope. Facing an opposing Survivor, maybe the mono-white Aura deck. So then finding removal is going to be important. Especially if they have a Sheltered by Ghosts on 2. It's a Feather of Flight that I can live with. And a Giant is going to be excellent too. Alright, so this turn, play some more creatures out. A Rakshasa is something else we can put in play next turn. Although again, it's possible I should be more picky and look for our creature interaction. But this is a promising start. And they have the Sheltered by Ghosts, sadly. So they also have an Ethereal Armor. Alright, that's a big swing. So it takes 7. Opponent up to 16. I can double strike Saboteur. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 plus 5 is lethal. Alright, that works for me. Can't even pay the ward, so they don't get the +1 counter, which is another funny interaction. Alright, and that'll do it. Awesome. So yeah, we got to see this black-white Abigale aggro deck in action. And yeah, I'm quite pleased with where the deck ended up. Has some very unique play patterns and some card interactions that you're not going to see anywhere else. That being said, I don't think the deck is quite competitive enough to cut it on the current ranked ladder, since the power level in Standard is just sky high, so it's really difficult to compete with these original brews. That being said, for a more casual environment where winning isn't the only goal, this is certainly a deck I wouldn't mind playing again. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.